Oh, I thought of another show that never got a second season. Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt.
That sounds like it needs 69 seasons. Welcome to the Macross Delta Recap Show, Episode 10. This is EXO along with the magical girl that live tweets about dead peeps, Celia Rose,
Hey there.
and the mecha expert that's from Alshahal, Canada. It's Chad from the Macross Mecha Manual.
Greetings, everyone.
How's everybody? How's the grief counseling? Let's go with Celia first. Have you
Oh,
recovered?
no.
Why am I laughing?
because, oh,
Because
God,
if you don't, you'll start crying.
That's true.
Oh God, I am not recovered. I was watching it and I thought we were gonna have a nice fun episode with the jellyfish festival, and then Messer was getting reassigned and things just spiraled down in a really cool sequence. Like, it was really awesome, but the moment that we lost Messer just ripped my heart in two.
Yeah.
So excellent episode, not so good for my feelings.
How about you, Chad? How you doing?
Jellyfish is the new pineapple salad.
Oh no.
That's all I can say. The feels, man, the feels. It was brutal. I did see it coming though, so that was I was a little bit prepared for it when the moment came. They did a really good job of making that moment as tragic as they possibly could. It was a blow. It's a great episode, but it was tragic for sure. And I can't wait to talk about it, I guess.
Yeah, when he left, I was like, oh, he survives. All right. Well, that's good, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, he left. Maybe he'll come back later, and then maybe he'll bite it then.
And
But
actually, we have his return to blame on the full booster technology.
oh, I saw that.
Curse the day they ever invented that infernal machine. He'd still be alive if they didn't have full boosters.
Yeah, it was a great episode. I was just amazed. I mean, yeah, into the sequence, I was really thinking, yeah, this guy's not gonna make it. Or there was like a part of me that thought it was gonna be a fake out, and then Konami was gonna eat it because like she almost got blown away, and
Yeah.
maybe I was hoping for the fake out, but overall, I think it was expected and unexpected at the same time.
Well, I guess that resolves the supposed love triangle between Arid Kaname and Messer. And you literally remove one person from the equation.
But it does resolve the whole rivalry between him and Keith because right before this episode, I was thinking about the show and I was like, if they keep this going, it's going to get repetitive. I really don't think they should have any more of the same confrontations because it's Messer versus Keith and now it's Hayate versus Bogue. And they've shown that like, I think twice already.
Yeah, it would lose its impact if Keith and Messer faced off too frequently and nothing came of it.
Yeah, so another great decision by the show and the showrunners. And I'm impressed. I was just barely getting worried about the repetition, and then they switched it up right on time. Good stuff, man. Good job, Kawamori. All right, let's get into the show. The beginning of it was in Windermere, and this one starts off with this guy, and he's gonna upgrade Heinz's equipment. They know that the equipment is gonna be powerful. It might take out Heinz because it's gonna put too much on him. And then Royd and Keith fight about it later. And Heinz says like he knew that it was going to take a toll on him, and he was ready to take the consequences.
So we're introduced to Mr. Berger or Berger, I'm not sure how to say it, from the Epsilon Foundation. What I got from that is that there are other organizations that Windermere is working with in order to achieve what they want. Because the Epsilon Foundation is also running analysis on protoculture systems as a whole. And they're also working to amplify the ruins that Heinz uses in order to not just strengthen the Song of the Wind, but also to strengthen the reach of it. And you see that later in the episode, just how those amplifications change that. And when Royd and Keith fight later, I thought it was interesting that both of them were arguing like to not to use Heinz, but in different ways, where Royd thought that Keith was going to push him further, but then when they're fighting and Keith has like his sword at Royd's neck, he says that I would die to keep him from dying, I guess is the gist of what I got from that.
I would give up my life
Yeah.
to protect him. Yeah, that was pretty unexpected, pretty sweet from his big brother.
It was very unexpected, especially because Keith, for the most part, has really manipulated Heinz a lot So I don't know if he really meant it in like an emotional way, like this is my little brother and I'll, die to protect him, as much as
Hmm.
it is I'll protect this asset that Windermere has in order
Hmm.
to achieve what we want. And I'm not sure which context he was saying that in at this point.
And the dad was also ready to give him up.
Yeah. King Gramio was totally ready, like, okay, well, it might kill him, but if it'll amplify the ruins and let us access other ones, then cool, no big deal.
I think that, yeah, their motivations are clearly kind of crazy. I think Royd is actually one of the more reasonable people in the whole group about like what they're doing. Not necessarily for any sort of altruistic reason or anything like that. I think he's just, looking at the big picture. He's like, if we end up killing Heinz doing this, then that's it. Our hand is played and we got no more card. And I think the other characters are like, well, it's worth it because if we get this stuff, then we basically win at this point, which kind of makes sense because later in the episode, and I think we'll get to that, we find out that the amplified Song of the Wind is doing a lot all at once. So yeah, so these sequences they deal with the divide between like Royd and Keith. And I think what this episode does more than anything else is make Keith look like an utterly unredeemable villain. We're not really on Keith's side from the Windermere perspective because he keeps wanting to, push his brother to the point of like where he might actually be seriously harmed or killed. And Royd is the only one that's kind of trying to put a stop to that. And then on the other side of the equation, as we'll get into later in the episode, there's other reasons to dislike him immensely. So yes, this episode is not favorable on Keith. Not even his good looks can save him from this much bad press, I'm afraid.
All right, so after the opening, we get to the jellyfish festival. Like I think Hayate mentioned that it was just a couple of days after the Windermere attacked, and it's this giant festival. And Chuck tells everybody that it's a festival for love. So everybody starts talking about the romantic stuff, and they go off to a dark corner where they could talk about Messer and Konami, and maybe even Molders.
Yeah, this is a pretty decent scene, actually. I kind of liked it. It was an opportunity to show a little bit of the culture of Ragna and to set up some other stuff for later in the episode as well. I guess the theme of the episode is pretty much about lovers, and they say that the Jellyfish Festival is an event for lovers. Chuck describes it as such. I think it was just it's a great little thing to set up some of the characters, and later on when the other characters get together, they're sort of gossiping. I think some of the characters are kind of like not so impressed with it. Like Hayate just seems like very, very unimpressed with all this gossiping talk about people's love life and stuff. He's just not at all interested. He would prefer everybody just to speak their minds, get out their feelings, and go from there. And if it doesn't work out, then move on to the next person. He finds this, I think, talking about it kind of distasteful. We, as the audience, get to laugh at it and enjoy it as entertainment. Actually, one thing I did take away from the sequence when it was at the Jellyfish Festival was that Machina sort of chides Reina for saying there's some things that a lady shouldn't say, and Reina is like she's not following any sort of ladylike rules at all. She's pretty much of the opinion that she's gonna say and talk as dirty and as crass as she wants to, and everybody's just gonna have to deal with it. Which
The look on
really
her
sort
face.
of yeah, the look on her face was great. It's an attitude that very much endeared her to me. I haven't really been the biggest Reina fan. I mean, I like the fact that Machina and Reina are great together, but I haven't been one of the strongest fans of Reina as a character. She's played a little bit dull, I think, and that's intentional, I guess, because she's something of a more serious character. But that hasn't allowed her to have too much personality. We get little glimpses of it every now and then, like the hacking sequence in that one episode. I think it was episode 7, and those sorts of things are welcome, sort of bits of personality. And I think this was another one where it's like, yeah, this is cool, just something to give her a little bit of who she is, the real her, give her some passion and whatnot. And I like that about this sequence. So overall, yeah, this sequence and the other one too, where they're talking later about what's going on was great. I actually like the one sequence, speaking of Hayate's discomfort with the topic of conversation about love gossip and everything like that. When he sort of comes forward and says, Kaname likes Messer. She should just come out and say it. And we get a brief shot of Mirage and Freya both looking very embarrassed because they're obviously in that moment forced to face their own feelings about Hayate, and it just it makes them very uncomfortable because of course neither of them can come out at that moment and say what's on their mind, even though they would very much like to.
But on the flip side, it also says something about Hayate. Like if he liked one of them, then he would have came out and said it already because that's his attitude towards it.
Well, maybe. That's the thing too. I mean, it's always easy to give out advice when you're the one who doesn't have to think
Yeah,
about it. I mean,
exactly.
maybe Hayate hasn't even thought about it yet, so it's easy for him to dispense advice and say, "Why don't you just tell everybody how you feel," and stuff like that. But he might not have even come to terms with his own feelings as well. Maybe he's not even paying attention.
Well, the little jingle that Freya sings while she's at the booth, it reminds me of the shanties that the old Kappa sings in Animal Crossing. Like when you're going to the island, he sings these funny little nonsense songs that are a little weird and kind of morbid, and that's what this song was. It was cute though, and it gave us a little bit more information on why Delta is even involved in the jellyfish festival in the first place. Mirage says that part of their contract and part of their job as Delta Squadron is to interact with the locals and participate in like local cultural events and that kind of thing, which is basically the staff justifying why we have a festival scene or festival episode in the first place. And we also find out during this sequence through Chuck that Messer's been reassigned from the Delta Squadron. And he's being reassigned to the Amaris system, and the Jellyfish Festival is his last night on Ragna before they send him away. And it does briefly cut to a scene with Messer and Arid gives us yet another jellyfish metaphor. When Messer apologizes for not training everybody, before he has to leave, and Arid says, "Oh, well, jellyfish babies learn how to swim without their mothers anyways." And this guy likes jellyfish just a
He
little
is
too much.
just an unhealthy obsession, I think. Something deep is going on there. I don't know.
I don't know what it is about it.
Unhealthy as an instructor, right? Because these guys are in deep trouble when Messer leaves. It's just funny that he said that. It's like, yeah, don't worry about it. They'll be okay.
Well, and even like last episode where Captain Johnson's like, it's not good if one of your pilots can take down all three of them. Like, aren't you worried that they're not strong enough? And our Mulders is like, whatever. Like, he's just a little too laid back about it.
Maybe he's the spy.
I don't know. It comes back to bite him in the butt later in this episode. But I really liked that sequence, and it led into some pretty somber moments afterwards. Not necessarily sad like the ones at the end where we lose Messer. I think they felt like heartfelt. Maybe not somber, maybe isn't the right word, but heartfelt moments with the characters when the festival starts to go dark and the glowing jellies come out of the water.
Well, getting back to the little scene in the steps, talking to somebody online, and I don't know if they got it right. They were saying, "Oh yeah, Kaname likes Molders and Messer likes Kaname,"
Yeah.
but it's never been confirmed, right? Because they were just gossiping, or do you think that that was something that they knew because they hung out together? Maybe Kaname told them that she had something going with Molders.
I kind of took it more as gossip, just because the first time we're really introduced to the idea of Kaname and Arad is introduced as gossip from the Bridge Bunnies anyways. And it sounds like Makina likes to gossip with the Bridge Bunnies since she gets a lot of her information from them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I took it. Maybe not necessarily that Kaname actually has feelings for Captain Molders, but that everyone around them is totally convinced that they do. And,
Because
and
they
they
hang
need
out
to
so
hang out.
much.
Yeah, and they need to hook up basically. Which is, I think, where that comes into play. And it gives us this idea that, oh, there's a triangle between the three of them with unrequited love.
I think so as well, yeah. Although I don't actually know if there's anything to those rumors. Those characters we really haven't spent that much time with, meaning Arad and Kaname, as far as their relationship. We know that there is something there. Not necessarily romantic, but there is
Yeah.
some sort of relationship there that they have been
Mhm.
building in some of the other episodes. Whether that builds into something else, I don't know. I think whatever relationship is there has been played up by Machina and her gossiping, and she does do way too much of it. She's just way into it. It's shown like in every episode that she's got her fingers in like everybody's pie. I mean, we saw that one episode too where where Reina and her were bothering Mirage and Hayate about what they were doing. She just talks about it basically to anybody who will listen, and she starts giving Freya all these ideas which are totally incorrect.
Yeah.
They might turn out to be correct later, but Machina doesn't know that. that, and neither does anybody else. But she's just spouting off crap. She's just to love gossip about other people in her life.
Since she does love to gossip so much, if she just saw them talking to each other, because Kaname just seems to like, like inviting people out places like, hey, let's go do this. And she knows that Ara likes jellyfish. So whatever something jellyfish related comes up, Kaname's probably said it to him in the past. So Makina loves to gossip so much and be like, ooh, and be really nosy about everybody's business.
Yeah.
I could see her starting that without like intentionally, trying to hurt either of them, but just being like, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe Captain Boulders and Kaname have feelings for each other. They just don't know
Yeah.
it yet,
We can see it because we know people like that.
Yeah.
And
Well, we've
that's
also
basically.
seen Makina do that to other casts, like other members of the cast as well, like talking about Hayate and Mirage. We just saw that
Mhm.
the last episode where she sees them on a beach and she immediately jumps to these huge conclusions about what they were doing, and it turns out they weren't doing anything of the sort.
Well, she didn't even see them. She heard it from the bridge
Oh
buddies
yeah,
that
she
saw
heard it from a third party, and then she, even worse. That makes it even worse. She didn't even see it for herself, and she's already building a narrative around it.
Without the gossiping and all that stuff. At the end of the episode, how did you guys take Messer and Kaname's relationship? Did you think that they were into each other?
I think it's
Ah.
definitely there on Messer's side, for sure. I think that's pretty much established by this episode. I think that one of the problems, though, with Messer as like a character is that because of his VAR syndrome, it seems like it explains a lot about his character, why his character doesn't want to go out and socialize with people, why his character doesn't necessarily take action on the relationships that he wants to build, is because I think he's fearful of himself. He's fearful of the relapse of the VAR syndrome, and so he doesn't want to be around anybody should that ever happen again. He's basically distanced himself from everybody around him because he doesn't know if like the VAR could strike again and he might hurt somebody, right? And it would just destroy him if that somebody was Kaname. But at the same time, it's clear that he's really into her. Now, whether or not Kaname is really into him, that's never been established, I don't think. I mean, I know she likes him, but does she like him that way?
Does she like him? Or does he just like?
What it ends up happening at the end is they really sell us on what could have been. Kaname lost the potential to have a happy ending with Messer. And as much as I would totally ship that to high heaven, like Team Kana Messer all the way.
I saw your tweet.
Yeah, but I think it's because of the impending doom. You know that he's going to die, so it makes you want to root for them even more. And once he is dead, then there's the tragedy of it. They lost their potential for what could have been between them because Messer was killed in battle. Because we really don't see much else of that. If there is anything, I think Kaname realizes Messer's feelings in this episode. But, mostly though, when like he gives her the bracelet and then when he asks her, please sing for me. Sing for me and my VAR syndrome. And it has to be you because Mikumo and Freya are incapacitated at that point. And that's where I think that she puts two and two together finally and understands, what he's trying to say through that because he's not being direct about it.
He gives her the bracelet. If that bracelet's been working for you all this time, why would you give it away? And I even tweeted at Celia, you don't give away your good luck charm.
Yeah, it was for dramatic effect. You had the glowing jellies rising
Yeah,
out
that
of
was
the
actually
ocean. Oh, and Kaname and Messer
Was
at
that
the
the
end of the
giveaway for you?
dock.
that was the giveaway for me. That was what telegraphed his death a little bit too much, and I was like, oh, okay, this is it. It's almost like a suicide victim, it's like giving away their prized possessions before they off themselves. It was a little bit too on the nose and too spot on, and also there is that old anime adage that I also felt was coming just for these last few episodes instead of like just one episode. It actually stretched over several episodes where we have a lot of time is being spent on two side characters who we ordinarily don't have anything to do with. And I always get worried about that, especially in a series like Macross, which is a war drama, where it's like, yeah, anytime that happens, that means either the character or if it's multiple characters involved, then one of them is going to perish. And they telegraphed it a little bit too much. Although, like I said earlier, one of the good thing about this episode is that even though you knew it was coming, at least some of us knew it was coming, it was just the way they handled it at the end was just, it was such a serious blow that it worked for me dramatically in spite of that.
It was so good though. Just the dramatic everything, but also with Chuck saying if you confess your love under a jellyfish, you'll be bound together forever. And while Messer didn't confess his love necessarily, he did share
He
his
should
true
have.
feelings with Kaname while he was underneath the jellyfish. Like, he says to her, "Hontou ni arigatou gozaimashita." He says, "Truly, truly, I'm thankful to you." Which, that's really strong wording anyways. And paired with what Chuck said, that just had a really strong dramatic impact. I really liked that scene a lot. And it also gave me that sinking feeling in my gut that we were going to lose Messer.
I was thrown by him leaving, to be honest. Of course, he was number one on my Deadpool, so I was like, oh, this guy's dead. But when he left, I was like, oh, all right, maybe I was wrong.
They
Look at that. You
fooled you.
actually got one on your Deadpool.
I was right.
Master Herman's still alive and kicking, so I don't know how my prediction's going to go on that one.
I think they're saving him for later.
Probably.
Let's talk about Mikumo. What is up with her?
She's a mermaid. That's the answer. So she's just casually floating in the ocean by the protoculture ruins. She becomes more and more mysterious. But at this point now, I'm just kind of like, I don't know if it's more mystery as much as they're trying to turn her into the token weird hot girl. Because she's really attractive. Like, her character design is super appealing, but she does just a lot of weird things when she's off by herself.
Yep, still waiting for a payoff. That's pretty much it, right? Am I missing anything from when they're on Ragna?
Yeah, we had one sequence actually that we should probably talk about. It was a brief sequence between Arid and Captain Johnson, where they discuss the protoculture ruins. They talk about how Lady M orders defenses bolstered on both Ragna and Alshahal, the only two planets left with such ruins. I guess establishes this heretofore unknown character called Lady M that is continually calling the shots, but we never actually see or know anything about her. She's even more mysterious than Mikumo, it seems, at this point.
Miranda.
They keep making mention of her. It seems like not an episode can go by now where they don't mention Lady M. So this is just another example of this, which I'm hoping will be paid off. I'm hoping that we will eventually get to this character, and she will make an appearance, and we'll finally get to see what the heck is this all about. Is it really somebody from a previous cast member from the many Macross shows that have come before, or is it a setup for something that's much more Delta related, like she turns out to be Keith's sister or something crazy like that?
Oh my God.
Or we just don't know. But at this point I'm like, yeah, okay, we get it. The Lady M's a big deal. Okay, yeah, let's move on. And if you're not going to show her at this point, then let's just go. But I guess they have to mention her so that every week we're reminded that there is some person out there. We'll see what more becomes of it. Just as a visual element, I'd actually like to talk about this sequence because I thought it looked kind of cool. I mean, there wasn't much to it, but I don't know, just for some reason, they're just sitting there eating food and just talking and whatnot on this little section of the Elysian, like way high above, and they actually just seated in an area right behind, it seems, one of the big anti-ship cannons on the Elysian, which is just cool. It was like a very interesting setting for them to have a casual conversation, both about different orders that are happening, but also about other stuff going on as well. So yeah, it was just it looked cool. I really enjoyed that whole staging of that sequence.
There was this line that they mentioned that Immelman is bound to the Windermereans.
Yeah, I think Arad makes that connection because Freya and Hayate were both on Alshahal the first time that Windermere utilized the protoculture ruins, or at least attempting to. So that's definitely setting up Hayate for more. Not only is it been implied that Captain Molders knows somebody who's been connected to Hayate in the past, but now he's like, oh, he's destined to be connected to Windermere.
That's what I'm thinking because he said like the last name, and I was thinking, is he talking about Immelman as in the family name or Hayate?
Yeah, who knows at this point. I did like the scene with Captain Johnson and Arid though, because it was a nice moment to show them as friends. Like, we already know that, they work together a lot in the squadron, but this was just like a nice little sequence to be like, these guys are buds and they've been friends for a long time, where they can just chill out on the Elysian and talk, just talk about whatever things that, you would kind of consider to be like off the record type of things, where they're voicing concerns and that kind of thing, or sharing information that isn't necessarily readily available to the entire crew just yet. But yeah, I liked it.
Yeah.
I like these little connection moments that we've been having. They're short and they seem kind of insignificant just because they are so small, but I like them. They add, just little bits to the whole story.
Sometimes you just need a friend. And I want you both of you to know, if you guys ever need anything, you guys can call each other.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
So we get to Alshahal, familiar place. And right off the bat, everybody has the VAR syndrome. And then we see the knights come out of the sky, and the Delta team show up, and then the Walkure jump out of their shuttle, which was pretty cool. But at the same time, I'm like, come on, Freya, learn how to land already, you know?
Like twice.
All right, so they go straight to the ruins on Alshahal, and man, let's just talk about it. It's a huge combat sequence, and everybody's fighting.
Yeah, I mean, we start off with this whole sequence which begins with the attack on Al-Shahal, and they say that the nuns' reinforcements were under VAR control almost immediately, and we can see effects on also the general population. The Song of the Wind is just like wreaking havoc on Al-Shahal, and then we quickly learn that apparently Listania and Airburl are being attacked simultaneously, as well as Lonadith, despite lacking any protoculture ruins at all. So we can see that the effect of the Windermereans' upgrades to their temple and the power of Heinz's song is just absolutely devastating. They're able to launch this massive strike against multiple planets, even many light years away from one another, and just create an enormous amount of chaos and control to a certain degree. It creates a real desperate moment. I don't think anybody really realizes how bad it is, at least not on the Delta Squadron or Valkyrie teams just yet. But Valkyrie wastes no time. They go straight for the protoculture ruins, especially Mikumo, who is just like, she's got this look of determination on her face that she's going to let him have it. And it turns out that her and Freya, out of all of Valkyrie, do. They get in there and just hit the protoculture ruins with their song and their fold waves. It sends up a crazy disruption that just like everybody can feel it way back on Windermere, and the Windermerean forces are just like, what just happened? The Song of the Wind just got like negated. So they're really shocked about what happened, because this was supposed to be their massive strike in which they were going to deal just a fatal blow to everybody, and didn't quite turn out that way. At least not the follow through anyway. Initially, yes, but it looks like they're definitely having some problems. So this was a really interesting sequence. It sort of paid off some of the sequence that happened earlier in some of the other episodes, especially the ones with Mikumo, where she was on Voldor examining the ruins, and she also in the earlier episodes where she alone would just keep saying, I can feel this wind, or there's something strange happening here and whatnot. Sort of like she's got a perception of what's going on in this musical battle and in this fold wave battle that most of the other members of Valkyrie don't. And I think Freya is the only other one that's sort of like beginning to understand it. Maybe because she's as talented as Mikumo, or has the potential to be, or maybe it's because she's Windermerean herself and she might be a wind singer. Neither of these is clear as yet, but there is definitely something there. There's a reason why she alone among the rest of the Valkyrie group was there with Mikumo when they hit the ruins and had that reaction where they were almost like pulled into some sort of dimension. Mikumo says it's like, at least in the subs that I was reading, it's like some sort of hole that sort of separated them from everything else that was going on during the attack. Whatever happened, we're not really sure yet. It was definitely a big moment, and it shows that despite the growing and just almost overwhelming power of the Windermerean weapon, Mikumo is sort of making impressive sort of discoveries herself, and her power is also something that has to be reckoned with more and more as time goes on.
The Delta team is just getting creamed at this point. Hayata is fighting off the White Knight,
Oh no.
and everybody else is just getting decimated without Messer. And while Mikumo and Freya are down, Konami had to step up.
I thought it was actually a really great character moment for her, since she talked herself down so much in the last episode. Where she really said that while she used to be the face and the lead vocal of Valkyrie, once Mikumo came along, then she's like, well, maybe it was better. I'm not really, like Mikumo, and maybe that position's just not meant for me. After all that dialogue that she had just to bring herself down because she didn't feel confident in herself, she has to find confidence in herself for Messer. He approaches her and says, I need you to sing. I need you to sing for me, before my VAR completely takes over.
It made me wonder, like, how she's gonna take this. I mean, she really did pull it off, right? She sang her heart out, and Messer was actually pretty close to killing Keith. Keith had that drone with him, and that's how he was putting one over on Messer.
Well, this whole fight with Keith is just ridiculous, first of all. Keith literally senses Messer entering the atmosphere. Like before they go into battle, Keith's
Yeah.
like, where is he? Why isn't he here? Where is the Shinigami? And then when he enters the atmosphere, his runes light up and point in Messer's direction. And he's all like, he's here. And then he just abandons Hayate, like, see ya, sucker. I'm going off to fight the big dog. Oh god,
Yeah.
I don't know how these two don't have dojinshi yet, because that moment right there was probably the biggest piece of Fujoshi fodder we were ever fed in this entire series so far. But what was great about this fight between him and Messer, with Kaname seeing Messer brought his VAR under control, and he was actually using his heightened sentences in order to keep up with Keith. And Keith is just resonating with it. His runes are lit up. He's riding on the wind. Messer's riding on the wind, and he's feeling like almost euphoric during this battle. Like it was
Yeah.
really cool to watch. And Messer is matching him shot for shot. You know, when someone blows up one part, you know, like a pod or whatever, it falls off, and then the other person's gets blown up and it falls off. And actually, it was the cannons. I think some of them, I can't remember who pointed this out. I read it on Twitter when I was browsing earlier today. But like, it's the eyes when it's in the Batroid mode, are those cannons
Hmm.
on the front nose. And it was
Yeah.
only one of those. He only fired one that I saw, and it just went clean
Yeah. It
into
was
the cockpit.
the right side.
Yeah, like just that whole fight was super exciting to watch, because finally we're getting that payoff between Keith and Messer and their rivalry. There's a lot of emotionality going on. You know, Kaname has to really support Messer because their two strongest fold wave producers basically are out for the count after getting drawn into that weird dimensional space. And it doesn't seem like Machina and Reina can really do much because they're not singing with her. It also gave us a chance to hear Axia, that's going to be on the album that comes out next month. And just was super dramatic and really, really well animated.
Keith shoots Messer's canopy front and center, and you don't see him dying. You see the whole thing just explode in blood. Then they don't show it, but it comes crashing
Kaname
down.
on her knees.
It's kind of interesting because remember how Hayate said that he would fly in a perfect straight
Hmm.
line? And that's basically almost the exact same shot, but going down. It's kind of sad because the guy is dead and he's still following this perfect path of flight. But yeah, it was really tragic.
Yeah, it was pretty devastating actually, but it was, as you mentioned before, I think it was something that was as sad and tragic as it is. I think it's something that these battles needed, because they were getting just too samey, and I mean, I know this is a funny thing to say about a cartoon, but they were becoming like comic book like and cartoony. It was like they'd engage with each other, and then of course something would happen that would pull the two forces away, and combat would remain unresolved. It was like nobody was getting anywhere. And it
Yeah.
became this ridiculous sort of thing where it was cycling around and around again, these two, enemy forces locked in battle, but nobody can seem to get a damn kill on anybody else. I mean, we have had like casualties and stuff, but they've been like nobodies, or like the other one, the fight in the asteroid fields, where we
The red
we
shirt.
had the red shirt, yeah, basically under the, yeah, under the command of the aerial knights. There, he was sort of like their protege to Herman's mentoring. We never got a chance to get invested in that character or to know anything about them. They were just sort of like an enemy of the weak kind of thing. It never carried any dramatic or emotional weight for us. But here, now we finally have a lot of stakes. The stakes are the highest that they could possibly be, and we have like a tragic outcome, and it makes the battles now a lot more desperate, a lot more meaningful. There's just more loss as well. Like one of our main characters has died. It's great. It adds some heft to these battles now, and makes them not feel so disposable. Makes them feel a little bit more real, a little bit more tense.
It's kind of weird to say. Like, yeah, I'm glad that they killed him off. I mean, I like the character, but it was a much needed relief from the repetition of the battles. But few people online, they're all saying it's episode 10. They can't kill him off yet. He's probably alive. There's no chance. I mean, the guy got shot with a giant laser right through his body. You see the blood explode, and then you see the plane going down. I mean, what are the odds of him coming back in the next episode, right?
It's like that with everything, though. Like anime viewers, I guess, in general, it just seems that when a death comes, nobody wants to believe in it for some reason. I'm not sure. It's probably a compliment because people are attached to the characters and whatnot, but we saw the same thing played out in so many other instances. It's like, oh, Gold might be okay, we never do see his body and whatnot, or like, Spike from Cowboy Bebop might still be alive at the end of the series.
He's
It's just like,
alive. He's
it's the same thing.
alive.
It's like every time we see this, it's just like nobody wants
Spike
to,
can't die.
nobody wants to accept a death. They all want to have that thing where oh yeah, they died, but then they come back again. And yeah, that can only play once really well. The rest of the time, you kind of have to stay dead in order for the drama to have any sort of meaning or weight to it at all.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear that he's very, very dead. And I'm
Yeah.
actually glad that they didn't show much, because I don't want to see like a human scaled creature getting hit by a mecha scale weapon and seeing the result of that,
Yeah.
because that's just
Yeah.
it's awful. I think what they did show was pretty graphic enough.
Yeah.
It might have even been worse than showing what would actually happen to the body, because you're seeing just like such a powerful dramatic result of that weapon hitting him. You can just, your imagination is left to fill in the gaps, and as any good audience knows, it's just like your imagination is the worst thing that can be used against you, as a viewer. So yeah, I think it was pretty bad. It was just lethal.
Yeah. My friend Theo and I were talking today, and he said that, we both agreed that it looked like it was at least a headshot, because it was such a small um, missile that was fired in, but that Messer was like dead. But he did point out to me that they could pull something similar like with Ozma in Frontier, where they're like, well, he had a really big flesh wound, but he survived it and he survived the crash. It looks like, we both agreed it looked like that he's dead, but there is that, like, a small chance of that potential happening also, since they've done it in the past.
I'm calling it. There's gonna be a funeral in the beginning of the
It's gonna
next
be so
episode.
sad.
So
Kaname crying while she's holding the bracelet tore at my feelings, and it made me even tear up a
yeah.
little bit. I don't know if I can handle Kaname at Messer's funeral. That'll just make me really, really sad.
So which CD is Axia coming out
Axia
in?
is going to be on the Walkure first album that comes out in July. I have it pre-ordered. I'm so excited.
All right, let's move on to messages. I'll go first, I guess. Visioneer, Vision 33R. The first Walk Your soundtrack is gonna sell a lot.
Hell yeah!
Is he saying that because he really liked Axia?
Well, whenever people are asking where they can get the songs from the episodes, I send them links to the CD Japan pre-order for the Walkure album.
Yeah.
So it's going to sell a lot.
I think it's also just the dramatic power of this episode too that just added a lot to that. Whenever you can get like your audience emotionally invested in what's happening on screen, they're always going to be, impartial to like what they see and what they hear, right? So I think this song is going to mean something to a lot of people who watched the series so far and really enjoyed the characters as well.
Yeah, it really does connect. Like when Fokker died, the name of the music piece that accompanies it is Fate's Arrow.
Yeah.
And that every time I hear that, I think of Fokker dying, or every time somebody mentions Fokker dying, I think of that song.
Absolutely, yeah, because it's your memory actually works best when you're making an emotional connection with it. That's why those sort of memories from our younger days when we had like some of our first really strong emotions to something, our reactions are so powerful and we remember them even much farther in life. When you have an emotional reaction to something, you can remember it that much clearer.
You think that Messer's death was pretty serious. Try being a teenager and they kill off a guy that you don't even expect for 1 second that was gonna get killed in a cartoon that was on a school day
Yeah.
afternoon.
It's like a cartoon story that has real life consequences. What's this? What's this going
Yeah.
on here? What is this adult thing?
I think I dragged my backpack to school the next day out.
Aww.
Oh, poor sad Alex. Is that going to be me when I watch SDF? Dragging
Oh,
my bag. I already
spoiler!
knew. Come
Spoiler!
on. It's
Fokker
like a
dies!
35-year-old show. I already knew.
Yeah.
That's why I knew about Roy and Claudia before this happened.
You already know that the ill-fated couples of Macross.
So, Ghost Bear 177. Messer wasn't training for the White Knight. He was training them to kill him. He's talking about the last episode when, during the paintball sequence.
Oh, did we make an error on that one?
I don't think it was an error because Hayate actually says, "I know why, you're doing this." And that was the discussion. Like we talked about what Hayate said. I mean, it's a training mission. You prepare for everything during a training mission. And if that's one of the objectives that Messer had, I don't know if it was mentioned later, but it sounds like a good theory, right? That he was training them to kill him, not the White Knight, in case he goes crazy with the VAR
I think
syndrome.
that's a reasonable assumption, yeah.
Especially
Especially
because he
given,
says to them later.
yeah, it's right. Well,
Did he? Did he say that?
I don't
I
know if he
missed it.
says it to the, yeah, maybe he does. Maybe Celia's right, but I know that it's mentioned before that Messer has concerns about him maybe hurting his other Delta Squadron members. I don't think that's in the last episode, but that's in,
Okay.
yeah, where he specifically
He
mentions,
says it like, "Oh, you could kill me," but he doesn't say it like that's why we were training.
No, he never says that was the purpose of the training, but he does say you have to kill me. It's an order. So
Oh,
so he doesn't say it
yeah,
outright, I was training you for this purpose, but he gives them the
yes.
order. So
Yeah, and we know from
yeah.
and we,
No, I
like I
got it.
said, we know from earlier episodes that Messer is concerned at that. Like that is one of his main concerns, is accidentally harming
Yeah,
someone because of his vulnerability to the VAR.
and even before he leaves, he's like he apologizes to Captain Mulders and he's like, sorry I didn't finish training them before, they send me away.
I definitely heard when he said that or read it when he said that, but it wasn't like a straight out point that this is why I'm training you. I'm trying to make sure you're able to kill me if you need to. He just said, you have the permission to kill me if I ever get out of hand like that. So I don't think our discussion was off, but again, yeah, it's a good theory.
Could you imagine how scary Messer would be as a training officer? Like, we look at it as the audience and be like, yeah, he's the perfect type for it because he's like real rigid and, all about the rules and this is what you do in battle type of thing. But like, if you have to face that, how terrifying would that be? If you're like a little newbie pilot, that'd be scary.
Yeah, yeah, he's
It's a
pretty
lot of
rough.
responsibility to place on these characters who are practiced and whatnot, but they're nowhere near the level of Messer or Keith or whatnot, right? So it's kind of tough to put that sort of responsibility on them.
Yes. All right. So this is from Sean Salisbury, who keeps giving us feedback and stuff to comment on every week. So thank you. Uh, he says, I think Keith's whole personal mission was to test how infected Messer was and to see if he could trigger despite not having the song, while also having one of the twins activate the ruins for them to use later. And he also says that he thinks why Messer doesn't care whether or not he lives or dies is because of the guilt he feels for the people that he killed back in Marienburg when he was first infected with the VAR. And he theorizes that Delta is how Messer is learning to cope with that guilt and to atone for the things that he's done. I hadn't thought about it that way before.
We don't have confirmation from the show that he killed
All we
people,
have are the
right? Did he?
flashbacks where he has blood on his hands and on his helmet.
Yeah.
So even if he didn't kill everybody, he definitely killed some people. And Mirage said at
Hmm.
one point too, Mirage said it after Hayate killed the red shirt, where she tells
Hmm.
Hayate on the beach, that every person of Delta Squadron has killed before and they carry that burden with them. So that may be
Hmm.
something that Messer does keep at the forefront of his mind, especially because he knows that he's been infected already and that there's the potential for that to happen again.
That's true. So he's somebody that's probably not sure if he's killed or not under the bar, right? Before he was in Delta or something like
Yeah,
that.
and the way that I've viewed Messer so far in the series is someone who's pretty hypercritical of himself. So even though he hasn't succumbed to the VAR syndrome and he's piloting the way he should and really being the best superior officer that he can be, he's thinking that he's not doing it well enough because of that potential for him to relapse with his VAR infection.
Now, Chad, going back to the first message from Sean, how is Keith taking advantage of Messer's VAR?
That's something actually that's got me curious as well. Like I'm not really sure if they make like a connection for why that actually happens. Like we have these sequences in the battle that show, like Celia mentioned earlier, that he's riding the wind and Messer manages to do it as well in spite of his VAR, and he actually uses his VAR to help him fight. But I'm like, do we know like what the connection is between the two of them? Are they actually resonating between the two of them? Is that why they can like feel each other when they're near kind of thing?
Because they're
So
boyfriends.
fine, maybe, but it's just like, well, like it's never established in the show at all, like what is actually going on between those two characters. Are like, do we think that there's going to be an explanation forthcoming, or because I don't think there is one.
So yeah, has there been hints?
The most that I've gathered where, they sense each other, Keith zeroes in on Messer for most of their rivalry that the show has demonstrated to us, where he's like sensing him and seeking him out. Like when Messer appears, he's like, yes, Shinigami. And then he goes flying after him and engages him in a dogfight. I don't know if Messer necessarily senses him so much as Messer goes, you are the most dangerous because you are the White Knight. so I have to tackle you. Maybe realizing that the other members of Delta Squadron can't take him on. Messer seeks him out so that he can keep the other members of Delta Squadron from getting in a fight that's way over their heads because it's beyond their skill level.
He just keeps messing with Messer. But not
No.
anymore. That's
yeah,
done.
it's done now. It's actually going to be very, very interesting to see how they're going to deal with him going
Yes.
forward. But I actually think I have a theory, because one of the things that they've been building in this series so far is the idea of the teamwork that's necessary to make them really effective. We've seen that Hayate can be sort of on another level of effectiveness when he and Freya resonate. It's been shown that Hayate's skill just increases very, very much, and he's able to do things that he wasn't able to do before. And I think they might start to do something like that with not just Hayate and Freya, but also just like the Valkyrie and their pilots as well. And I think that might be the key to defeating the aerial knights, even though they have someone like Keith who is way better than all of the rest. It's just like, well, ordinarily maybe they would be outmatched, but if they work together, it would satisfy one of the themes that's part of the Macross Delta series, which is this essence of working together, this sort of interdependence. I almost described it as codependence in some of the earlier episodes of our show here. And I was worried about it at first, but I think it's something that will be more dramatically satisfying, I guess, than any sort of concern I might have had about Hayate's piloting skills or any of the other members of Delta Squadron. But I think that's kind of what they're going to have to do, because they're going to have to come up with some way to deal with the problem going forward. I mean, like every episode we have an attack from the aerial knights, so they've got to figure out some sort of system and fast in order to deal with it.
Do you think they're going to add somebody else to the team? I mean, that's a possibility, right?
Yeah, but I hope they don't add somebody who turns out to be a placeholder for Messer, like another ace pilot. They just so happen to have in their pocket.
I'm the opposite. I'm actually looking forward if they do and how they handle a new person, not just the team, but story wise, the showrunners, how they're going to handle bringing in somebody this late in the game. So I'm interested.
I don't know if they will, just because like the chemistry that our current team has so far, I don't
Mhm.
know if I want someone to interrupt that.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm open to both. I'm fine if they don't, but it feels like there should be 5 in the Delta Squadron too. All right, well, let's close it out. Celia, where can we find you when you're not on the Macross Delta recap show?
You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Celia Rose Cosplay, and also on Twitter at Planets Twinkle. I learned the other day that if you search Macross Delta on Twitter, that my account is like the first thing that comes up because I tweet about it way too much. But if that's what you're into, that's where I'm at.
Chad, where you at?
You can contact me at marchingcw@hotmail.com. You can also find me at the Macross Mecha Manual, my website. And you can find me on the Facebook page for the Macross Mecha Manual, which is facebook.com/Macross Mecha Manual. And lastly, posting on various anime message boards such as Anime Nation, ANN, and Macross World.
And this is EXO. You could find me on the Macross World Facebook page or the Macross Delta Facebook page, or you could tweet at me at Macross Tweet, the official Macross World Twitter account. We'll see you next episode.
All right, guys, take care.
All right. Good night.